Michael Snyder is the resident film critic of the David Feldman Show, and we thought we'd introduce him to listeners of Connect the Dots. These are the movies Michael Snyder will be talking about: The Danish Girl, Trumbo, Brooklyn, Spotlight, Spectre, Suffragette, Bridge of Spies, and Room. Tell me about The Danish Girl.
Well, you know, transgender issues have become a big deal in the news. Caitlyn Jenner, the transition from Olympian Bruce Jenner to, I guess, quasi-supermodel Caitlyn Jenner has been very, very public. But all of this kind of is rooted back in the 20s. And in the 20s, a Danish artist named Einar Wegener began cross-dressing with his wife's encouragement and approval. They're both painters. And eventually he began to realize that he was a woman trapped in a man's body and always had been. And this true story has provided the foundation to a movie called The Danish Girl, directed by Tom Hooper, who won the Academy Award for The King's Speech. And it stars Eddie Redmayne, who's already got himself plenty of awards for playing Stephen Hawking in The Theory of Everything. And he takes on a pretty difficult role here in Einar, but pretty great stuff. As Gerda Wegener, Einar's wife, the almost, I would call her the prolific Alicia Vikander shows up and does a fantastic job. She has to be a wonderful kind of yin to his yin. No, maybe that yang to his yang. Anyway, they're both fantastic in this film. And as we see Einar begin to realize that he is in fact Lily, not Einar, it's very, very moving. And then the struggle they have to help him reconcile all this moves forward in Bohemian Europe in the 20s, starting in Copenhagen and moving to places like Paris, where he finds the possibility of the first gender reassignment surgery. And again, this is all based in historical fact. I'm sure it's somewhat fictionalized and dramatized, but the actors are wonderful. Supporting work by Matthias Schoenaerts as one of Einar's childhood friends. Ben Whishaw, who in fact is an out gay actor and plays Q in the Bond films, and we'll get to that in a second. He plays a guy very interested in Lily, not Einar, and it's powerful stuff. You know, Tom Hooper directed it, and, you know, I love The King's Speech, even though it was sort of a fancy masterpiece theater for the cinema. Maybe they could have called this The Queen's Privates, but The Danish Girl works just fine, and I thought it was really, really solid stuff. Very moving.
I saw the movie. Yeah, I saw it. It's very relevant. It's beautiful. I mean, every shot is a postcard. It's about two artists, and so they do justice to that. I mean, the cinematography is spectacular, the lighting, the acting. But, you know, it was about... It's about something very important. A little slow.
Yeah, it's a little dry. I do want to say that what's really fascinating is Gerda's career as an artist is kind of belittled and diminished in the shadow of her husband until she starts painting him as Lily, or her, Lily. And then suddenly she has this subject that moves her and makes her passionate and creates these passionate paintings, and the ones that get her attention and art shows. I thought, again, it's a little on the stately side, but that's what this director does, generally speaking. And I thought it did justice to the story, you know. Let's put it that way.
Well, I hate to say Caitlyn Jenner might have cut them off at the feet. I think had we not had Caitlyn Jenner this year, this would have been a much more interesting movie. I don't know how edifying the movie was. That was the problem I had with the movie. It was beautiful. It's about an important subject. It shows his struggle to become a woman and what he had to go through. But I'm not sure it couldn't have been said a lot quicker.
Yeah, you know, it's possible. But again, you know what? We really, from this particular review, don't know how things play out. And I guess those who are familiar with the story are aware of it. But it is a tragic circumstance when you think about this person being such a pioneer in a field that is still considered on the cutting edge of medicine.
Yes.
You know, so there you go.
All right, let's go to Trumbo.
Well, this is a film biography that tells the story of the acclaimed novelist and screenwriter Dalton Trumbo, who ran afoul of the House Un-American Activities Committee and their commie witch hunt in the late 40s, found his career in free fall, was jailed and blacklisted, and then vowed to strike back. And one of the things about this movie is that it can give people a little insight into the mania and the backbiting and the internal ugliness of what surrounded what was known as the Hollywood 10 and the divisive kind of destructive schism between people like John Wayne and Hedda Hopper on one side, who fancied themselves great patriots, and Dalton Trumbo and his friends and colleagues who felt that they had the right to believe what they believed. And, this film rises or falls in a lot of ways on the strength of the performances. And Bryan Cranston, who you mostly know as the star of Breaking Bad, Walter, the meth-cooking, cancer-afflicted former teacher in Breaking Bad, plays Trumbo, and he is compelling and fantastic. Much like Eddie Redmayne makes the Danish Girl work at its heart, with great support from Alicia Vikander. Cranston is the heart and soul of this film, and yet he also gets great support from Diane Lane as Trumbo's wife, and in particular, as the villain of the piece, Helen Mirren as Hedda Hopper, the venomous gossip columnist who was one of the most powerful people in the entertainment business for years and years. She's, what she could make and break careers, and I guess it was kind of true. Dame Helen Mirren, I throw in the dame because I respect her so much, is so good in this film as Hedda Hopper, and hateful, awful, nightmarish. Oddly enough, the movie directed by a guy best known for comedy, Jay Roach, but John McNamara's screenplay is pretty great, and there are questions of things getting whitewashed a little here and there because these guys were brought before congressional committees and were expected to rat out their colleagues, and it's amazing. Also, what we see in terms of characters such as the man who was a dear friend of Trumbo's and a renowned actor, Edward G. Robinson, who was on Trumbo's side and then was co-opted by pressure to keep his jobs coming and to stay on the good side of the likes of Hedda Hopper. And there are interesting, let's put it this way, there are some fascinating performances of celebrities, famous actors. My favorite of them is probably the Kirk Douglas portrayal, which I thought was pretty cool. Dino Gorman is really good as Kirk Douglas. So Michael Stolberg's Edward G. Robinson, maybe not what you expect. There's not a lot of that, hey, see, I'm on the side of the commies, see? There's none of that stuff going on. But also John Goodman as Frank King, who was the guy who took a chance on Trumbo after he had already been smeared and gave him an opportunity under false names to write a lot of pot boilers and genre films. Trumbo, in fact, wrote 2 award-winning movies under assumed names. He had sort of ghosts or beards, if you will, and I guess at least one of them won an Academy Award, maybe 2. He won 2 Academy Awards under fake names. One for his screenplay. Maybe you can remember. Sort of escapes me at the moment, but some great stuff. Roman Holiday. He wrote Roman Holiday, for instance. That's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think he won it for Roman Holiday and Spartacus. Well, Spartacus he was
no, not Spartacus. No, something else. And forgive me for not remembering, but I saw the film about a few months ago. But the point being that he had to do it under fake names, and eventually Kirk Douglas said, "I'm putting Dalton Trumbo's name on the Spartacus." Richard on that. Johnny Got His Gun is one of the best anti-war novels out there, and it was Trumbo's work as well. And such is the irony,
Yeah. It's worth exploring that period. He has been deified. Maybe some would say he wasn't as innocent as the movie says. He may have. Well, I think a lot of liberals, Hollywood liberals, cooperated and named names. I thought the struggle that Edward J. Robinson had was kind of interesting. Anyway, it's an interesting film. We don't know how we would hold up given
under that kind of scrutiny and that kind of pressure, for sure. We should point out that a couple of favorites, comedian actor Louis C.K. plays one of Trumbo's pals, as does Alan Tudyk, who is known to some as part of the Serenity crew in the Firefly TV series. Elle Fanning, one of the two Fanning girls, plays his daughter as she's growing older. It's a prestige production, considering what might have been a story that Hollywood would prefer buried and forgotten, because it's an ugly, ugly story in terms of the way the entertainment is depicted. It's pretty cool stuff, I thought. And again, Trump, without a performance of great power and magnitude by Cranston, it doesn't work. And
right.
So for me, it worked.
Okay, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn is a very, very sweet film. It's a dramatic and romantic story of a young Irish immigrant who's navigating her way through 1950s Brooklyn in New York. And one of the big assets of the film, other than its very adorable, compelling, and charming lead, Saoirse Ronan, the young Irish actress, is that the script is written by Nick Hornby, novelist behind High Fidelity and Fever Pitch and About a Boy, and also the screenwriter, I believe, of all three of those films, and also the screenwriter of An Education, one of my favorite coming-of-age films of the past 15, 20 years. And in this case, he finds a sweet spot. And this is a very emotionally resonant and gentle love story. And it's also a story about coming of age and also the progress of one woman to establish herself on her own. And there's sort of no perfect period detail here. A cast that sells the whole thing. And you get the immigrant experience as this girl comes from Ireland when she's sponsored by a priest who her family knows and trusts. She needs work, and she wants to go out on her own. And she gets a look at New York in the early 50s, and she sort of buys in. A little bit homesick. She's in a boarding house with other women, because back in the day, that was what you did when you were a single woman. And she tries to find work, and she finds love with a kind of charming and ambitious young Italian-American. This reminds me a little bit, in some ways, of the Marvel quasi-superhero thing, Agent Carter, which is also about a woman in the late 40s, early 50s, in the case of Agent Carter, moving to New York and dealing with having to live at one of those all-women's boarding houses and stuff. But it's a little different. And again, Saoirse Ronan is absolutely fantastic as Iris Lacey, the girl. And, if you don't have the support of other good actors, again, something like this wouldn't work. And it could have been a cliche. The kid could have been a cliche, the one she falls in love with. But instead, it doesn't happen that way. Jim Broadbent plays the father, the priest who kind of sponsors her, and of course, the charming Julie Waters plays the landlady at the all-women's boarding house, and Emery Cohen as the young, ambitious American kid is fantastic. And Domhnall Gleeson, who's an actor who appeared in Ex Machina earlier in the year, plays against that sort of type as the kind of well-to-do man back home in Ireland who also fancies our heroine. Good stuff, directed by John Crowley. And again, Nick Hornby's screenplay is note perfect. This is a very sweet movie. If you want to go to a date movie, don't go to some horrible Hollywood rom-com. This is what you take your beloved to see. Far more effective.
Spotlight.
Wow, this is one of the most important films of the year and one of the best, maybe in my top 5. Mark Ruffalo, Rachel McAdams, and Michael Keaton star in this as the three components of the Spotlight, which is the investigative branch of the Boston Globe. And they dig stuff up, and they reveal the truth about stories no one's heard about. They try to get to the core, and they don't care how controversial. In fact, the more controversial, the better. So they have uncovered this massive scandal of child molestation and a cover-up about this scandal within the local Catholic Archdiocese in Boston in the early part of this 21st century. And this tears the whole place apart. The good Catholics of Boston are shocked and horrified to even suggest this. These guys start getting death threats and what have you. Again, a true story. They earned the Pulitzer Prize for the investigation, and this is powerful, exciting, deeply affecting and fact-based human drama with excellent performances all around. Mark Ruffalo and Michael Keaton are like probable nominees for awards. Liev Schreiber is the Globe's crusading new editor who people are wary of and who says he lets these people off the leash at the Spotlight segment of the paper. It says, go for it. Find out the truth. Stanley Tucci plays a very dedicated and difficult lawyer trying to help the victims who have been marginalized or may have been bought off by the church. In general, this is rough stuff because, it's a very volatile issue. Directed by Tom McCarthy, co-authored by McCarthy. It hits every note. It hits every corner of the story and does a fantastic job of it. It's heartbreaking. And at the same time, it's kind of uplifting that people in journalism can still make a difference in this post-digital age of ours. Other good supporting work by Billy Crudup as a kind of sort of a two-faced legal type, and John Slattery as Ben Bradley of all people. He's good. Every role from top to bottom is properly cast.
Can you let's blow through Spectre because I want to get to Suffragette, Bridge of Spies, and Room and Spectre.
Sure. Well, Spectre's the fourth of the James Bond films to feature Daniel Craig as the British secret agent, an assassin codenamed 007, and I think it nicely wraps up the interconnected quartet of movies that began with him rebooting the series. The reboot is Casino Royale. Other than Connery, Craig's my favorite cinema version of Fleming's Super Spy, Ian Fleming's Super Spy, and they updated him pretty well. Originally a Cold Warrior of the 50s and 60s. If Craig quits now, these four films can kind of stand alone, like Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy about Batman with Christian Bale. I thought it was pretty good stuff. Of the four films, maybe the third best, because I thought that Skyfall was the second best, and I thought that, love Casino Royale. But, an amazing action sequence in Mexico City that opens this on Day of the Dead. And maybe there are some moments where I kind of shrugged a little bit, but you can't go wrong with Christoph Waltz as the villain. He was born to play a Bond villain.
We could have seen more of him. I could have seen more of him in this movie.
Yeah, and I thought that, there's a few reveals I really like. But I also want to point out that the women, chemistry or no chemistry, Léa Seydoux and Monica Bellucci are fine actors in their own right, and they're very, very sexy gals. And Léa Seydoux is sort of the kind of the co-star in this one. And, it wraps things up. What can I tell you?
It's a fun waste of time. It's a fun waste of time.
Yeah, exactly. And it also introduces Grace Fiennes as M for the first time, and he's very good. There you go. I like Spectre.
Okay, but I didn't really learn anything watching that movie, so let's move on. Suffragette, which I see tomorrow.
Oh, well, a meaningful, well-written, and well-acted look at the early and treacherous days of the suffragette movement in the early 20s in Britain as women sought to vote in equality, and of course the latter is still a problem on the wage front these days, is it not? It's a little starchy and occasionally a little leaden, but it's adult drama with adult themes and an important message, and the lead actresses are great. Leading the play is Carey Mulligan as a washerwoman who sees inequities and feels compelled to get on board and actually follow the fugitive Emmeline Pankhurst, played by Meryl Streep, who is leading this growing suffragette movement in the UK. What can I say? Having Streep as the grande dame here is kind of a waste in a small role. I mean, you couldn't get a British actress for this one, but Abby Morgan wrote the script, and since Meryl got so much praise for playing Maggie Thatcher in Abby's Iron Lady, the script, I guess they figured, whatever. Abby Morgan is also the woman behind The Hour, one of my favorite dramas, serialized dramas from the UK over the past few years. So, you're dealing with talent here. Great support from Helena Bonham Carter as a fellow suffragette. And Ben Whishaw, who we mentioned earlier, and who plays Q in the Bond films these days, plays the Carey Mulligan character's husband. He's all over the place. This particular segment is a tribute to Ben Whishaw. It's an important story, too, and directed by a woman, Sarah Gavron, written by a woman, Abby Morgan.
But gentle enough for a man.
Yeah, exactly. People should know about this stuff. Aroma Garay is in it. It's a pretty stellar piece of work. A little starchy, like I said. But Suffragette is an important story, like the one behind The Danish Girl.
Bridge of Spies.
Well, this is an historical, provocative Cold War adventure and an intrigue that's pleasurable to watch, but not truly great or memorable. It's the work of a director named Steven Spielberg. I don't know if you've heard of this guy. And in any case, he wrote the thing, and the Coen brothers and a guy named Matt Sharman wrote the script. Spielberg directed it, excuse me. And it's basically starring Tom Hanks as the American lawyer who had to negotiate the release of the U-2 spy plane pilot shot down over Russia at the very beginning of the Cold War. We heard about the old Russia, U.S., the Soviets versus the U.S. It's historical. This kind of thing, though, again, rises and falls on the performances and also a solid script, and you get that. A workmanlike job, I would think. And Mark Rylance, as a Soviet spy here in the States, they're going to try to trade up for Gary Powers, the U-2 pilot, basically runs away with the movie without his textured, layered performance. Tom Hanks, solid, lovable American, would probably dominate this thing, and it wouldn't have been as good as it is. I think America should have a holiday called Hanksgiving because he makes so many prestige films.
Yeah, but, I saw it. I think Spielberg squandered a great story, squandered the Coen brothers, he squandered Hanks. I mean, visually it was stunning. The acting is always...
Mark Rylance is great. Come on, Mark Rylance was great in this thing.
But
again, the best thing about it.
I really didn't learn anything. And that's what really irritated me, because this was a teaching moment that got squandered.
Well, in that case, you're right. They went for the surface, and that's the problem with this movie. I thought that it could have been great as well. I was really excited about it. I enjoyed watching it as I watched it, but not truly great and not truly memorable by any stretch of the imagination. We should wrap up with Room, because this is a truly memorable performance on the part of a young actress. Room, Brie Larson. This is a festival sensation about a young mother and her 5-year-old son who have stayed closed off from the world for the child's entire life because of something very screwed up and tragic until circumstances intervene, and then they're thrust out into the real world. One of the best films of the year, with a pair of the best performances of the year, particularly Brie Larson, who plays the sister in Amy Schumer's Trainwreck, and struggling but committed female social worker in a very underappreciated drama called Short Term 12. She's doing work here with a depth that might not have been imagined from her pretty solid but slighter performances in like 21 Jump Street and Community on TV in the United States of Tara. She is fantastic. Joan Allen and William H. Macy as her conflicted and separated parents who have to deal with the psychological problems that she and her son face after they're kind of basically freed into society. It is potent and heartbreaking and just really extraordinary stuff. Lenny Abramson directed it. Emma Donoghue wrote it, and I say thumbs up. Brie Larson and Saoirse Ronan, the two actresses that I've mentioned today, that I think deserve nominations unquestionably for the performances they gave in their respective films.
Fantastic. Michael Snyder is the resident film critic for the David Feldman Show, Friday nights at 7 p.m. And if the listeners to Connect the Dots would like to hook up with you, how do they find Michael Snyder?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Culture Blaster, which is one word, Culture Blaster, and also on Facebook at Michael Snyder's Culture Blast page. You can like it. You can hear David converse with me down the road, and you can read various essays and other radio and podcast segments. And just in general, but thanks for the airtime, David.
Well, and thanks to Lila Garrett. Now, you may not know this. This is the Lila Garrett Show, Connect the Dots, that you're guesting on, as am I. You're a big movie buff. Did you know? I think this is true, so I apologize if it's not. But I have heard that The Way We Were, the Barbra Streisand character, is based on Lila Garrett. Did you know that?
No, I did not. And I would just say that's a wow moment for me if that's the case.
Yeah, I may be speaking out of school here, but I'm pretty sure The Way We Were is based on Lila Garrett. That's
who played the David Feldman character in that book?
Robert Redford, of course. No, this is. I think it's probably true. And if this were Fox News, that would be good enough. But I will look into it. Michael Snyder, thank you so much. I'll see you later in the week.
Okay.